were heavy to start with, and the power unit ones, the engines, they were super durable. They ran forever and ever and ever. And the areas that used a lot of irrigation power unit engines were some of the areas that Moline was the strongest in tractor sales.
Well,
They also
you know,
put a higher compression head on higher altitude. So they matched the power. So you didn't lose power when you went up in altitude.
well,
They
you know,
also built
the,
them for butane,
Yeah.
because it was down south, they needed the,
well, they could take an
cheaper
LP
fuel.
gas tractor and run it 1,000 hours and change the oil, and the oil was cleaner than when they put it in. But the big thing when you're selling a user, a tractor, the competition says, well, that thing has only got capacity to run, I don't know, what, 5-6 hours, and they have to refuel. And you ought to see some of those things in Montana and western North Dakota where there isn't a filling station close by or anything. They had tanks hanging on the front and hanging on the back, and they somehow, and they do so they could run 8-10 hours without filling. But I don't know what on the standard tractor. Does anybody know what the average length of they could run with a load?
5, yeah.
What, 5 hours?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're out, no.
with the LP or with gas.
That,
LP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
That was
it's
a
more
full-
than that.
well, it depends on the size, whether
I
they had for
was
a tank
thinking
and what
with
you were
the-
doing.
Yeah.
If you were
Yeah.
choring, they ran
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah,
We had a LP chore tractor. It seemed like you filled it once a week, maybe. At idle, they were super efficient. It's just like fuel injection. At idle, you only put the amount of gas in there that it actually needs. Where a gasoline engine, you have to be pretty rich on idle to keep it running. And so, most choring jobs, you didn't run at full throttle. You basically ran part throttle or even almost idle. We loved the hand clutch on that Z. We could, it would build extensions on the platform, and you could step off. You just stand on that platform and push the clutch in, pull it out. When you come to a gate, one step down, you go open the gate, drive through it, get back and close the gate. And compared to the M Farmer or a John Deere where you had to climb up on the axle and then up on the platform and put it in gear, with Moline hand clutch, you didn't even have to take it out of gear. Just pull your clutch back and there was a transmission brake in there that just the weight of enough, if your ground was anywhere near level, you didn't even have to set the brakes. And of course, you release that as soon as you push the over center clutch forward. But it was a secondary brake that was put in primarily to help you shift gears, to bring the transmission to a stop, to help you shift gears. But it also worked as a pretty effective level reliant type parking brake without any effort, automatic.
Well, an LP tractor tank, the fuel does not deteriorate with age. Didn't be there for 5 years. It's just as good as what you put it in. No deterioration whatsoever.
Say, Dick, we were talking on the phone different times there, and we were talking about the early G1000s.
Yes.
You were involved in that with bearing issues, and if you want to highlight on that a little bit, and then Bob Singer, maybe highlight with him too, that he worked with you there too.
Okay. Yeah, when I started in '65, that was the very beginning of the 3-speed Amplitorque. In fact, there was only one hooky prototype there when I started. And that was being called to be the primary Amplitorque in what we call the X90, which was turned out to be the G1000, which was a bad number. But then the fellow that was working there was designing the control valve for it. That valve got so heavy that it took 2 guys to lift it up to put it on the tractor, and it still didn't work very well. fact, it was so jerky that when Phoenix, when we were testing it with these spinner plows on it that you were speaking of, pulling 4 bottoms, trying to plow 10 inches for cotton, at full throttle, it would lift the front end of the tractor right off the ground. And after a few days, it'd break the rear axle. It broke the axle. So we'd have to change the axle right there in the field because the dealer we were working with and Minneapolis-Moline didn't have anything to haul that to town when there was no wheel on it. So we used a truck with an A-frame on it. That's how we got it repaired. But anyway, then I started working primarily on that 3-speed valve with a fellow by the name of Lowell Severson. And when we got through with it, we had a valve that one guy could lift with your 2 hands and put it on the bottom of the tractor. Still wasn't perfect, but we'd come a long ways, and it took us a year or so to do that. And as you mentioned, Bob Singer was there when we first started on that, and then he left. He was very anxious to get that in production, of course. To back up just a little bit, I think when I got my job there at Minneapolis-Moline, I saw an ad in the paper and filled out an application, of course. And I'd been to several automatic transmission schools, and no one in the test lab had had any experience with multiple disc clutches at that time. And they recognized that. So I went in for an interview and went home with a job. And I said to myself, did this really happen? Were those people that interested? But it turned out to be a really good job. I enjoyed work there immensely. I think Mike did too. So back to the 3-speed, that Bob Singer left and Bill Coleman took over. And then he put us on there, working on, a group of us working on that transmission every day until we got it to function reasonable. And in between there, they built 70 some units for CalPac. We'll say 76 because I don't remember the exact number.
The original reason for the 3-speed was CalPac and other canning companies wanted a super low
correct.
speed
That's right.
to pull their pea picker combines.
They wanted a slower ground speed than they were able to achieve with any of the mechanical transmission.
So Moline built special, I don't know how many tractors that had 2 amp-torques. Had 1 amp-torque and another amp-torque behind that, and a housing that was bolted in between. It was 14 inches long and length of the tractor by that amount, which made them turn terrible. But for the pea pickers, it was no problem. And a lot of those tractors, they released to canning companies for a year, and after a year, dealers who had sponsored them got all the payment for the lease payment, and they were able to sell those. A lot of them were 602s at a pretty good price. But at the time they sold them to a farmer, most of them had the second amp-torque taken out and set aside to use for parts. Literally, unfortunately, a lot of them, just got scrapped. There are a few around, but the 3-speed give you that super low without that extra length by having 3 speeds in the length of the basic 2-speed amp-torque.
And then the M670 is what most of them were in.
Yes.
In the 3-speed in the M6, that tractor had less power, so it wasn't as jerky as the G1000. And one of the reasons was you didn't have to have as high pressure, plate pressure, as you did for the G1000.
I mentioned the G1000 problems. 2 things happened on the G1000 program. They designed the tractor originally to be 90 to 100 horsepower because that's where John Deere 4020 was at, and that's where the International 806, and those were the big sellers people moving those bigger tractors. So that was the design power for them. It got about a year from production, and someone in marketing, I don't know, I didn't know, Jim wasn't around there at Hopkins, but someone in marketing at Hopkins decided instead of 100 horsepower maximum, they were gonna have 110 horsepower base. And you don't think, well, that's pretty easy to do, you turn up the fuel a little bit. But when you design gears, that last 10% has a tremendous effect on gear and bearing life. It's kind of like an exponential curve. You know, for a long time, it's pretty linear. You know, you twice as much power, half the life. When you go in that tail end, you add 10% and you can cut the life in half. So this happened. Well, they went through all the gear and bearing calculations with Timken, agreed they looked pretty decent, yet even at 110 horsepower. They built a limited number of tractors and were sold that first year as a low band G1000s. And was it 50 or 150? I don't remember the quantity. But that
It's 100 and something.
90 never, because the first 10 they took back, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was really 100.
But when they wanted to build them, their machining line that machined the final drive housings, and the G1000 was the first to have the center section and then separate axle sections. They had a very good tooling to make that at Lake Street, but it wasn't ready to handle the big multiple piece design, 3-piece rear end. So that those prototype or early build G1000s, they've had all the castings machined outside with someone that had good equipment on a CNC. Everything was dead on to what it was supposed to be. And I've talked to a number of people, and there may be some here, that claim that they had one of those early G1000s. They used it hard, very hard, for 5,000 plus hours, never had a bit of rear end trouble. Well, then they brought the tooling, or started making them in-house. And when they started making them in-house on their new tooling setup, they didn't get it zeroed in on the first ones. And the dowel pins that located the axle housing to the inner housing was off a lot, you know, like 60 thousandths. So that meant the bull pinion shaft was in there at an angle. The axle bearings were, one of them in particular was running at an angle that they couldn't handle. Tapered bearings need to be in a line. And that led to a lot of bearing problems. And also they had trouble keeping the pinion gear aligned to the ring gear. That would move up and down on them. And that caused a lot of the early failures. Eventually, on the time they came out with the Vista, they had made a big improvement. And then on the 50 series, they went to a bigger ring gear yet. And the White series then
The 55 series.
yeah, they went to a bigger, they went to a 20-inch ring gear instead of a 17. And those were really durable.
They all were as a regular, they call those pilot run, that first 100. They were all machined outside. So the first of the production run of Minneapolis-Molines where they were manufactured internally.
Mike, that serial number 1 low band of Ron Wolf, who lives by me, he said that he had most trouble with was rear engine seal. And oil in the clutch was terrible. But he never had much rear end problems. That was Ron, that was from Normandy, Frank Sales in Normandy.
Rear seals were always a problem to get sealed. And then there was also the oil would come up from the through the transmission shaft on the later ones and get into the clutch. And yes, it had a lot of clutch failures due to oil getting in there. And it wasn't until they put the lip seal in that they really solved that. And that was,
The wick out. They had a rope seal.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
See, Mike, how long did that misalignment in the two
Forever.
housings occur?
Well, most of the straight G1000s had that problem to a different extent. Some of them were great. They weren't all off.
law of averages says some of them were gonna be right.
Hell of a way to run a company.
But by the 67 Vistas, 67, that was much improved.
They had tighter,
They had a lot better
Tolerances.
control. And these that were bad, Singer tagged them up, had them tag them up, the quality people, as being bad and not to use them, set them aside and scrap them, melt them down. When I went back later, they were, their initial
He needed
G1000 reception of those 50 or 100 was extremely good, and marketing wanted to get tractors out. And they didn't have enough good housings, so they went back and used these that they knew were all.
they started a sortment system. They sorted them, these are a little better, they might work. They used them up, and then they used the same analogy and resorted.
By the
then
end,
resorted.
some of them didn't last long. But
Got done 10.
Yeah.
And then these
I don't know
guys
if they
would
ever
send me
started.
out to talk to the guy that got this and try to smooth things over.
That's
and,
right.
Well, we did have that exchange program,
yes,
and so, but that was expensive for the company. But they tried to do everything possible to take care of the customer and get his problem fixed up and that, which you gotta hand to, because that was expensive. But,
and the other thing was after they started having some problems, people got leery of it and were constantly checking for any metal shavings in the bottom. And I know from personal experience, the one I started farming with, there was pits in the pinion gear already. I used another 3,000 hours before I said, well, this eventually is going to wear out, and took it out. But even though it started to, you wouldn't break teeth off. The surface would pit. And it's
Spall.
Yeah.
spall out.
Just roll off.
And a lot of them would run a lot of hours, particularly if you didn't, were using it for other than pulling a spinner plow or really working the heck out of it. Would run a lot of hours even after it did start to spall.
Would it get noisier with?
Yes, it would get noisier. And of course, after it had trouble, as soon as the customer heard noise, he was concerned. He wanted to fix it right now.
When they did go in and correct it though, did they get the alignment issues, or they just went ahead and put it back together with new parts?
Depending on how good they were at catching it.
Okay.
No, you're talking about in field service?
Well, like a 1000, if you came in and you had misalignments in your valve pins and stuff, was there?
It
was
depends
there a
how
fix?
good the serviceman, and there are certain things you can tell from the bearings, whether the way their wear pattern
Yeah.
will give you a pretty good indication if it's misaligned. And it would be up to the block serviceman, or if, in some cases, some of those dealer servicemen did enough of them, but they knew, they were pretty smart people.
Okay.
And the ring and pinion was a little harder to tell.
Yeah.
Question I have is, I bought a G1000 76, and the ring gear pinion the dealer found out was going out. Now, the mechanic said that when they replaced it, they put a 1050 in, is that?
They would have had to replace the whole rear end.
Oh, because I don't know what they put in
The
there.
Vista parts would go in, which were better than the original G1000 parts.
That must have been, because in
The Vista, they
80s,
changed the number of teeth and the pressure angle on those pinion or spiral bevel teeth, and they lasted a lot better than the first ones.
Because 4 years later, I had a dealer up in Algona, I had, I don't know, he took the cover off, he double checked that, and then the ring gear and pinion was real good yet, that one that they replaced 4 years earlier.
The Vista parts were a little bit larger, I think, if I remember right, but they also changed the number of teeth and the pressure angle to help.
Well, one other question is, I asked you about that torque, they made a bigger torque for a little while there, because the dealer up there, a mechanic, looked at mine and he said, well, you got the Wheatland torque. Now, what does that mean? I mean, the 2 speed.
The Wheatland torque had the real wide spider gears in the Amplitorque.
Yeah, I mean, he's surprised that I had that.
And they went mainly in Wheatland tractors, but then when they come out with the Vista torque, they dropped it. The Vista torque was stronger yet, but there was a limited number of those built with the wide spider gears on that double housing there in the center.
So that was a good torque then.
I don't know. I've never talked to anyone who really had one. From looking at it, it should have been a good torque.
Yeah, I know the mechanic, he was surprised.
Yeah.
How about a G900 rear end, how are they?
G1 100 was basically the same as G1000, except it used the original narrower roll gears. But it would have been, the G900s were like the late,
Original design.
well,
G1000.
most of them in it, 900s end up being Vista. Or
Yeah.
67, yeah, late design.
Looking at the corporate tractor frame out here, and you look at the rear differential, pretty much looks 50 series, but heavier. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And it also
Even
has,
the
this
three-
one has the outboard planetaries.
Okay, I hadn't looked at the out here, but this one out here, I just was looking
Yeah,
at it.
that, everything on the corporate tractor was very heavy.
Even the 3-point arms, I can see they're thicker and heavier, and all
Yeah.
the lifting apparatus and everything.
I can tell an interesting little story about those corporate tractors. When they parked them, the picture that Mike had in his article there, they're parked along the fence. Well, that door there, I went in and out of there several hundred times in my career. And we walked by them tractors sitting there, and we kind of wonder what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to them. And one day they came out and they said, you guys are all going to work 3 hours overtime every day, and we're going to scrap those tractors. And we did it on overtime.
The question is, too, is couldn't some of that program been salvaged?
Of course.
You know, I know there were some things that
There
were
was something that had to
difficulty
been
with.
something
Why,
from.
in 1970, the farm group lost $32 million, I think. And 71 was quite a bit better. They cut their losses. I think it was still about $10 million loss. And when white motor people got in there, they just,
Slash and burn,
yeah,
yeah.
they were not interested in redoing that program at all.
And even you mentioned, I think in an article too, we could have kept the Hopkins plant open within a
Because,
year or two.
yeah, and by 73, we couldn't build enough tractors.
Yeah.
You know, the prices improved and tractor sales took off in the mid-70s. It seems historic if you go back up until even through the early 80s. About every 7 years, there was a spike in tractor sales. 56 was, that was down, but 64 and 5 were really good for industry as a whole. And then it jumped until 73 before the tractor sales picked up. And in 70, I think Minneapolis-Moline only built like 600 tractors. Oliver built, I think, 1,500 approximately. The problem was they had built ahead in 68 thinking that sales were going to be like 66 and 65.
Yes.
So a lot of the 68 production was very good. I think over 20,000 for two factories. Most of them ended up in branch houses
Yeah.
and or here at the factory.
Greenfield, we call
There
it
was
Greenfield.
80 acres out here that was full
I know
of
my
tractors.
uncle had a 1030 case that first didn't get sold, get in the field until 70 or 71.
Yeah.
And you know, the 70 series case tractors were out by.
And
yeah.
by 72, White was pushing to get rid of them, so